Well, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to House and Home. And we're super excited you decided to spend some time with us this Friday. We'll be diving into a really important topic, closing time. This is going to be a different fall or different kind of a lead into the winter than we're used to. And given that a lot of our schools are being closing down after Thanksgiving. So we've got to look at this a little differently than we usually do. So we're really excited to share with you some best practices in terms of making sure that your house is closed properly and is safe and secure over the winter break. For those of you who haven't had an opportunity to meet, my name is Scott Fusell. I'm the host of House and Home here at CSL Management. I'm a Beta Theta Pi from Middle Tennessee State, where I had and continue to have a life-changing fraternity experience. And I'll be managing the chat today. So I've got a couple friends of mine who are going to be doing the majority of the heavy lifting this morning and this afternoon, depending on where and when you're watching this. And so I'll do the best I can to keep up with the questions that are in the chat. And we will, once we're not able to get to as we're moving through the session today, we will get to at the end. So with that being said, I do want to say thank you right out of the gates for being here, by making some time for us today and making some time for yourselves to invest in your professional or volunteer development. It just reveals how much you care about this experience, these facilities, and specifically the men and women that call them home. So for that, no, we are extraordinarily grateful and are just really appreciative of you spending some time with us this afternoon. So with that being said, let me introduce you to our lineup today. Super excited to have Will Wolt with us from Campus Cooks. A couple of weeks ago, when we announced that this was going to be the topic for this particular session, they reached out and said, hey, there's some additional tips that you might want to consider in terms of closing down the kitchen over the winter break. If you would like for us to contribute, we'd love to be a part of that session. So we welcome them in and are super excited to have Will sharing with us some of the best practices that we need to be considering when we're shutting down the kitchen as well. So we're just really blessed in that we have so many industry partners who have come alongside us as we rolled out this House and Home series the last few months, and are thrilled that Campus Cooks is back with us today. So also in the lineup today, we've got Woody Ratterman back with us. He's our managing partner here at CSL, and you guys have heard from Woody just about every week the last few months. So Woody, we appreciate you making some time to be back with us today. And then finally, usually managing the chat, we've got Christina Kinzer. She's our senior operations specialist here at CSL Management and is my right hand on the teaching team. And she's going to be doing the majority of the heavy lifting today, helping house directors and local house corporations and national house corporations make sure that their homes are secure over the winter break is something that Christina has an extraordinary amount of experience in. So didn't know anybody who is more appropriate or better equipped to provide some guidance in terms of how to make sure that we do this process properly and effectively. So we're super excited to have Christina sharing with us today. And with that being said, I'll say welcome to Christina and ask her to take it away. So go for it, Christina. Thanks for sharing with our group today.
Thanks, Scott. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for choosing to spend a Friday with us. I want to talk about what we want you to get out of today's session. We want to be able to create a to-do list, but in order to do that, we need to make sure that we have clarity on what we need to prepare for. We want to be knowledgeable about best practices for closing your house, especially given that this year is probably going to be an extended break for a lot of you. And then we also want to make sure that you've got direction for creating a plan. Okay, Scott.
One second, Christina. I'm getting there.
Okay, no problem.
There we go.
Okay, so in order to get there, this is what we're going to do. We're going to think through what your goals are for the break. You know, is there a new normal now after COVID-19? Provide some guidance on where to start. Walk through the CSL closing checklist, and then communicate and implement, help you work on communicating and implementing a plan for your team and your house. So here to help us start looking towards what winter break is going to look like this year is Woody. So I will let him get going on his stuff.
Thanks, Christina, and good afternoon, everyone. going to just share a couple of points with you before Christina and Will really dive into the granular items, if you will, of shutting the facility down itself. But in preparing for today's presentation, we thought it would be good to share a few comments where we're seeing from a strategic standpoint as we're going into this extended winter break. We were asked to participate recently in a presentation and a virtual seminar, if you will, at the University of Idaho. And one of the biggest questions that kept coming from the group as we were preparing for it was, who has this crystal ball and what is the next couple of months going to be? If you've been on any of our calls the last several months, we've talked about in the business world, they keep telling you looking beyond 4 to 6 weeks in this environment is not necessarily productive in their opinion. The business gurus out there, in terms of there's so many things changing, there's so many unknowns. And so really this winter break, as you're preparing for it, and again, before we even talk facility, just thinking strategically and everything that we've been talking about since April, how is this going to be informed over this winter break period? A couple of things that we're looking at, and we would encourage all of you to think about strategically, is Tuesday is going to have an impact. The results of the election, if we do get the full results Tuesday or shortly thereafter, many people feel will have an impact. What that is, regardless of your political standpoint, it doesn't matter. It's hopefully wherever we go with clarity and we go with a little bit more certainty in terms of what the game plan is going to be on a global picture, and more importantly, what we're doing here in the United States. So we got to see what comes out of the election. Also, what happens during the winter break? As we are seeing in some areas, they're in their second or third wave. We're seeing numbers escalating. Fortunately, we may be not seeing the morbidity that we were seeing previously, but cases are certainly on the rise again. We're starting to get nervous. We're starting to see the numbers increase. So what does that mean over the winter break? How do we perform, especially going through the holidays and different aspects of that? Obviously, the strategy was made early on by the universities going into the fall semester, knowing that the winter break should be a period of escalation. Therefore, we're not bringing our students back, which I think is smart. But we'll definitely have to see what that means moving forward, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. We've talked about recruiting. I think by and large, overall, as an industry, if you ask either on the men's or women's side, we felt good about coming out of the recruiting season. We certainly were expecting the worst, and I think we came out on most campuses much better than anticipated. Now, what is that going to look like going through initiation and our ability to come back in the spring strong and capitalizing, if you will, on the good recruitment that we have, and what's that going to inform the spring recruitments that we certainly have coming, deferred recruitment that's coming up as well. So continuing to strategically look how we're doing recruiting, how we're doing an initiation. You know, we've had many discussions about this over the last 6 or 7 months as well, and not forgetting, as a house corporation and a house director, we have a key role to play in both of those. What is our new normal? Christina was kind of hitting on that earlier in terms of what operationally is going to stick with us beyond the pandemic. Are you evaluating that? Are you paying attention to that? Certainly during the winter break, as we hopefully have an opportunity to catch our breath a little bit, hopefully get to enjoy the holidays as well, thinking through both as our house directors and in partnership with our house corporation, what have we seen in the fall that may stick with us well beyond once we are through this pandemic, and especially on the design standpoint. I think if anything that's out there that's going to be a continued conversation, and one that we continue to have with many of our clients and partners, is related to the sleeping porches. So we can't necessarily just sit on our laurels as it relates to the operation or design. We need to consider that and continue to look at that. Another point we would make is focus on what we can control. We can't control the election. We can't control what is going to be going on with the pandemic and what the results over the winter are going to be, but we can control what we're doing budgetary wise. I know that there are many organizations on the national level that are coming and speaking directly to their house corporations, continuing to encourage that we take a conservative step as it relates to our reserves, saving money, spending less. That means in looking into the summer planning part, we are working with a majority of our clients right now talking about the summer of 2021. We have seen and we have talked about in years past the fact that we have to start our planning process earlier simply because of the construction market and the fact that people are busy more than ever. Well, now we have that on top of the fact of a pandemic. and navigating those situations. And do we spend now or do we continue to reserve? So it is CapEx season, and we need to be taking this time to evaluate that and what we can and can't do, or what we must do and what we could defer going into the summer 2021. We would encourage still a conservative stance, at least till we get through the next 60 to 90 days, and maybe we turn this thing in a different direction. But the standpoint, again, focusing on what we can control is key. Member agreements, again, as we've seen, many of you on this call, I know I'm preaching to the choir to some of this, students are making decisions about housing next year now. So if you haven't already been working on your agreements, if you haven't been using all the tools and resources like our great partners at MJ and Fraternal Law and other strategic partners out there have provided you related to that, and going into modifying the agreements appropriately, now's the time. And then we can't have a webinar about the pandemic and any scenario that we don't talk about communication. We got to communicate and continue to communicate. So with that, let's go to the next slide, and just some real quick highlights that I know everybody on this call is familiar with, but we still need to be working on our contingencies. What happens if we open late coming back in the spring? What if we don't open at all? We know some of you maybe just reopening. We know that our friends at DePaul, that's a campus where they delayed filling the fraternities and sorority houses going into the fall. So we have to continue to pay attention to our contingencies, developing those contingencies, and having a game plan for whatever the next 2 or 3 months will bring. Safety is a big element. It always is over the winter break, and Christina will talk about that more in depth, but it is unprecedented. Again, could we have a webinar or discussion in the last 7 months that doesn't talk about communication or the word unprecedented? But it is, and we're seeing it across campuses, whether it's the Abolish Greek Life or anything related to race relations and everything in between. So it is key as you're going into this winter break that you think about safety and make sure that we have all of our protocols in place, and our life safety game, if you will, is top notch. Communication, just a couple of things. And again, this may seem very elementary, but we will see more and more as we work with our clients. In practice, these things still don't happen. Do we know what our house director plans are, if we have a house director, and where they're going to be? And do we know who, if anyone, will be around? Some of our students, and looking through and understanding who's staying and who's not, especially on the men's facilities who tend to be open up year round. What members may not be going back for whatever reason, whether it's travel, logistics, or whatever it may be. But all these just communication plans, and I think it's really critical going into this particular extended period that we're very clear on dates that we're going to close and dates we're going to open, and that we're re-communicating those throughout this winter break as we learn more, again, about what is happening, what our campuses are doing, and being able to pivot if necessary. And finally, if that what if happens, that is probably the most critical piece that, as we talked about coming into the spring and the summer leading into the fall, continually as a house corporation and a house director, where appropriate, communicating out to our stakeholders what the plans are going to be. We can't necessarily just shut down and then hope for the best that we open back up in late January or early February as planned. We need to be making sure that we're staying in touch. We know how to stay in touch with our residents, our members, and our stakeholders. And lastly, again, can't say it enough, especially our insurance partners really appreciate that the facility is getting checked routinely, ideally weekly, certainly no less than every 2 weeks. Someone needs to be eyeballing the facility and looking at it and making sure there aren't any issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina and Will to really start getting into some of our specificity, if you will, in terms of the process of shutting the facility down. Christina?
Thanks, Woody. So before I start kind of just going through the checklist, I want to just provide the caveat that this is going to be dependent upon your house, and each house is unique and everybody's schedule is unique. And so just make sure that you're doing these tasks at a time that really makes sense for you and for your facility. And with that said, we want to talk through what are some steps that we need to take in order to make sure that, you know, the house is ready to go for even a normal break, but especially this year, given that a lot of universities are having an extended break. So we want to start by, of course, scheduling any semi-annual preventative maintenance that might be due. This might be kitchen equipment, heating equipment, ice makers, anything of that nature. So going ahead and getting that scheduled so that they're able to have the flexibility to work around your schedule. You want to make sure that you're assessing the cleaning needs of the house and scheduling that as needed. Make sure that all trash has been removed from the house, that hallways are clear of debris, all fire doors are closed, valuables have been secured. You know, that might look like for your house that all of the individual rooms stay locked, whatever it takes to make sure that valuables have been secured. Check the house to make sure that interior lighting is working properly. Even some things that we've done at a couple of properties that I work closely with is gone in and added timers onto interior lights, just so that, you know, there are certain lights within the house that are turning on, you know, when it starts to get dark outside. Check all of your exterior doors to make sure that they are latching and closing properly. And then consider using, I just said this, consider using your lighting timers. If you do have lighting timers, especially on exterior lights, maybe do a walkthrough of the exterior of your property before you do leave the premises, just to make sure that those timers are functioning as they should. Okay, Scott? We also want to make sure that all of the windows are locked and closing properly. Close any blinds or drapes that are able to be closed. Make sure that you have got all of the life safety contacts updated with your monitoring services. So who do you want them to call first? And in the event that that person doesn't answer the phone, who should they call second? Notify the university or local police department if the university doesn't have a police department or is unable to work with your property. Go ahead and notify those local police forces of the vacancy of your house. A lot of times they're more than willing to do some extra patrols around just to make sure that you know, there's not anything out of the normal going on. We want to make sure that we're restricting member access, so turning off key fobs, changing door codes, anything that would allow the members to have access, we want to make sure that we, you know, take that ability away. Consider decreasing your trash services if your house is going to be closed for an extended period of time. It will save you a little bit of money, and you know, is obviously unnecessary if you're not putting anything in the garbage. Okay. All right. And so here in the Tennessee Valley, yesterday it was 80 degrees outside. Today the high is 58, and I felt like I was freezing when I walked out of my front door. So I'm sure a lot of you in more northern parts probably think that that's a little silly, but you know, winter weather is upon us, and we want to make sure that our houses are prepared to be able to handle freezing temperatures and snow. So next slide, Scott. So let's talk a little bit about winter weather preparation for our houses. On the exterior, it's important to know whether or not your hose bibs are freeze proof. Some hose bibs don't have to be winterized because they can't freeze. They've been designed that way. But if your house is a little bit older, it's definitely important to make sure that your hose bibs get winterized to prevent freezing, and that the hoses are put away and stored. For your irrigation, we want to make sure that those systems are blown out so that there's not any liquid in them and then turned off for the season. Confirm your snow removal vendor. Make sure that they have got your house on their schedule and are prepared to proceed. Make sure that all of your radiators and vents are open and free from obstruction. And then we want to make sure, especially in the event that even if you do happen to leave the house, that your thermostats are set to an appropriate temperature to prevent your pipes from freezing, and that ranges from 65 to 68 degrees.
Christina, can I jump in just for a quick second?
Mm-hmm.
Because something occurred to me, and I meant to bring this up, and I know it wasn't in our slides previously, and it will certainly be something that you might be able to hit on if it's not already in your slides. One other piece that I meant to throw out earlier was related to supplies, right? If you're watching the news now, and you're seeing now that the thought process out there is that many people are starting to stock up again, and some of these supplies may be limited that where we had challenges in the past. We have certainly seen the supply chain has, by and large, been able to meet what we've needed for the fall. We've not heard of any houses that have really been negatively impacted on the supply chain front. We're not anticipating any of that moving forward either. Certainly the news is out there is that many of the manufacturers have been preparing for the winter and knowing that this might be something that happens. But I would certainly encourage you as well, and going into the winter break, is making sure that you do have a good supply of initial products that you need, those that aren't going to be perishable, that you can have in the house and be prepared to open up in the spring. So I just wanted to throw that in there, Christina, before we moved on to Will. So sorry about that, but I forgot to mention that in my comments.
That's okay. Okay, Scott, we can go to the next slide. Oh, so sorry. Okay, so obviously this year has been we've had just a really unique fall due to the pandemic. And one of the areas from an operational standpoint that was largely impacted going into the fall was food service. And we're really excited to have Will from Campus Cooks here to just help us talk through what the best practices look like for shutting down our kitchens, especially if we're going to have an extended break. So with that said, I will give it to Will.
Well, you may need to take yourself off mute, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that better?
There we go.
All right. Perfect. I apologize. Good. So basically, we're going to be talking about closing down your kitchen. And with this year, things have changed completely different. If we learned anything from March, is nothing is normal, and we want to address and be ready and be prepared as much as we can. So you're going to take some time, and you're going to have to set some new expectations. So for those of us that work within the industry and provide service, we've been training, in the companies, our chefs and things on how to close down and get things ahead. For those of y'all that are managing your own chefs and things, you want to start out with some training. You want to start out early on by setting best practices for your closure and your cleaning. So that's helping them get used to it, because what you're going to look at is normally we'd be closed for about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks in December. This year we're looking at anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks or 2 to 3 weeks, depending upon where in the country you are and what the school is giving us. So you want to view it as an end of the year close down, just in case the really unintended closure happens for the rest of the year if we come back and we can't come back for a while. So you're going to train those best practices, those procedures for closing and cleaning and getting the kitchen ready to be able to be extended out. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you have a cleaning checklist and that you work through that checklist in a way that it makes sense. So if you're building that checklist or you're training that checklist for your own chef, that you have it set up to where you're cleaning stuff as you're done using it. So you're not going to make the first day cleaning the week leading up to close your flat top. You're going to leave that till the end, because that's going to be one of the last items you're going to use. So lining it up in an order that makes sense is, as you close off this area, I can on Monday before close clean out all my ovens, and then I just have to wipe them down as I go before it's time to leave. Helping the chef think through that and having a very comprehensive cleaning and closing checklist. Other parts of it to really look at are what are specific to the facility. So talking back to the occupancy that we mentioned earlier in the presentation, is there going to be a house director, or are there going to be students in there that have to have access to the kitchen? So determining when you're writing that checklist, does gas need to be turned off to the equipment, or does equipment need to be left on to allow whoever happens to occupy that house to still be able to cook? Those are decisions that you want to make ahead of time so that you're not on the last day trying to figure out, oh, shoot, do I turn this off? Do I not? It's on a checklist, and we don't forget those major details. So those are huge. The other part that Woody was talking about, which is important, was inventory. So you want to balance what you're reducing your inventory down and what you're building up. So yes, you want to make sure that all of the dry products that will last, and that you think something that lasts 6 months to a year, just depending upon when we could be coming back into the house, you can stock those items up, make sure that you have a good amount so that you have a solid pantry, make sure that you have, to-go containers, things like that aren't going to expire, done. But the other part is to start a couple weeks out reducing all perishable inventory and working through with your chef and with the team that's there to make sure that you still maintain great food service, but you're using up product as it gets done. So that on your last day, as you get to close up, you have as minimal amount of perishable product as possible there. But you also have a good back stock of non-perishables so that you can step right in and start service up when it starts up, hopefully right away into January, beginning of February. You also want to make sure you notify your vendors of the closure date and the range that you're going to be closed so that you don't have somebody continuing to drop off uniforms, or you don't have cleaning supplies being dropped off. All those background vendor items, you want to make sure that they're lined up and they're aware as well. So it's key to that communication that Woody was speaking to earlier. And then the other piece is occupancy. You want to confirm who's going to be in the house, or if there's going to be anyone in the house at all. And that's doubly, you need to know what you have in the kitchen, and if somebody's going to have to use the kitchen. So are you turning off water? Are you turning off gas? Or conversely, when it's time to come back from that break, how soon is a house director going to be in that? Because you have to be, the chef and the food service need to be in the house a couple days prior to the first day of service to receive orders and vendor schedules and those sorts of things. So just making sure that there's really good communication about who's going to be there. Scott, if you want to, the next slide, please. The next piece is really having a comprehensive inspection, completing an initial cleaning checklist, and then documenting it with pictures of the kitchen and the service areas. This serves you a couple ways. You can have all of this information so you know what condition the kitchen was left in, because sometimes if you have people that are occupying the house while you're gone, the condition may change over the course, and you want to know that initially it was all set up, cleaned, ready to go. The other piece is that this is for peace of mind for stakeholders. So if you have someone who wants to know what the kitchen looked like when they closed up, you can give them that information with those pictures and the documentation without them having to come physically inspect, so that there's that piece. And you want to schedule that inspection on the last day after the last meal is served. And in this day and age, we can do it virtually or in person. So there are ways to do it. You can do it by Zoom, you can do it FaceTime. You can take the pictures, email them, and have someone bring it back, or you can have whoever is responsible for the house, that's their house director, student leadership, what have you, actually go through and do it in person and sign off. But you really want to make sure that it was completed and that you guys can relax, because we're going to close up a lot of these houses come Thanksgiving, and hopefully this allows a little extra time with our families. You want to be able to relax and know everything was taken care of, set up in a really good way, so that there's no worries about the condition of your house there. The other piece is you also want to review any construction or property specific instructions for closing. So if there is a maintenance being done in the kitchen, or there is something being done that ahead of time that's going to be done, there's going to be extra dust, and maybe you can move all of your smallwares into the insides of coolers or something to keep it from having a huge cleanup when the chef comes back in, so that you can minimize that cost. So just, again, it's communication, knowing what's going on, knowing who's going to be in the house and when they need them. Next one, please, Scott. And then the last piece, we talked about perishable food. You want to set up a donation. Somebody around there, whether it be a local food shelter, it be an entity that you're paired with as part of the philanthropy with the house, make sure that somewhere all the perishable food, the minimal amount that we had left at the end, has somewhere to go, and that you have a record that it went somewhere. That's a great story to be able to tell and to share with the members in the house as well. And then the last bit is just really making sure you have a closing meeting, confirm the checklist, the inspections were done, discuss ongoing challenges, any solutions that you may have coming up going forward, and even some really low-tech stuff, right? So during the break, there's going to be some maintenance. You need to confirm that those issues were discussed. So maybe the oven just wasn't holding temp right, and this is a great opportunity for someone to come in at any time and not have to schedule around someone trying to cook. Set dates for those completions during the break so that you know. And then look at equipment checks. We talked about you want to be in there every couple of weeks checking on the property, checking equipment. There's some really easy low-tech stuff that you can do. If you have freezers and you happen to have some bread or some items in there frozen that aren't perishable, super low-tech, simple things. Get a cup of ice, freeze it, and put a coin on the top of it. And then all you have to do is open up that cooler, and if that coin's still sitting on top of the ice, the cooler never lost temp. If it's partway down the cup or it's at the bottom of the cup, then you know that there was an equipment failure, something happened. Low tech, costs you nothing except for a penny or a quarter or whatever coin you put on top. And it gives you peace of mind. It's a quick check on your equipment and you know that it's working, or it's a big flag, hey, I got to get this freezer serviced before it goes on. And then really the last bit, again, you can't say it enough, define the communication plan with the stakeholders. Who wants the information? Who wants the pictures? Who wants the checklist to know it's done? Who wants the schedule of when you're coming in? And the last bit is scheduling, again, making sure that you have a date once you have those firm opening dates again, 3 or 4 days prior, where the chef can come in, receive an order from the vendors, clean everything up, wash, clean, and get ready to go, and then have a great spring semester. So that's pretty much all I have, Scott. I can turn it back over to you for Q&A and a wrap up. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. We appreciate you being here, and thanks for sharing all that. So as Will was talking, I was reminded that one of the points that we want to make sure that everybody takes from today is to take full advantage of your resources. So whether you work with Campus Cooks or another food service provider, they all have resources like this to help you make sure that you're closing your kitchen down appropriately and effectively over the extended break. I see Mary on here had a great comment in the chat about preparing for winter in Michigan and some of the tips that she puts into place in their facility. There, folks, and I know Cindy Stellhorn from MJ is on the call, and there are tons of resources within their resource library that talks about how to make sure that the house is adequately prepared for winter weather. And you can access most of those through the CSL Housing Hub. So take full advantage of your resources, whether that be your food service provider or CSL management or your insurance company or your international headquarters. You should have plenty of access to the resources you need to make sure that you're doing all these tasks, these really critical tasks, effectively and thoroughly. They should be all at your fingertips. So just want to encourage you to take full advantage of your resources as you prepare for this break. So with that being said, before we dive into the Q&A, I did want to offer up one reminder. This is our last session that we are doing for this term because everybody's kind of now into closing time mode and kind of starting to wrap and prepare for the closing of the semester or the quarter. So we'll be taking a break from House and Home until early January or early to mid-January. So just want to give you a quick heads up on that. All of the sessions that we've covered previously are all available on our website. So if you have a specific question about a previous session, know that you have access to all of those workshops either on our website or through our YouTube channel. So with that being said, I want to hop over into the Q&A. And Woody, are you seeing anything that we haven't covered so far. And while Woody's looking that up, I just want to make sure that if you have a question, jump over into the chat and share it there, and we'll address as many of these as we can in the time we have remaining.
Nope, not seeing any at the moment, Scott. So another good tip from Greg in there in terms of keeping the water running in the sink so that our sewer traps and we don't get sewer gas coming back into the bathrooms. Certainly a good tip as well. You know, one of the things I would put out there too, especially for our older homes that may have basements or may have large window wells that have drains down if we have an exterior stair that is going down to a basement, there's typically a drain there in our window wells. Many times, especially right now with the fall and the leaves falling, we see that those get missed by our landscaping companies or don't get the attention that they need. And we'll have a big rain or a snow or ice melt. That water builds up, obviously finds its way in through the door, and we have an issue. So that is something certainly to make sure that you have a game plan and you're watching part of your exit when you're shutting the house down, as well as making one good walk around, especially between now and the end of November when we have so many leaves falling down to the ground that typically find their ways right onto those drains and create problems.
Yeah, that's a great point. Go ahead.
Will, and I have a question for you. I'm just curious, and I know I think Bill's on the call as well. Have you guys seen anything, or are you hearing anything on your end related to supplies or disruption in the supply chain on your end? I know we have a close contact of ours that is on the PPE directly on the front. And it was interesting, 2 or 3 months ago, he and I were visiting and we were just talking through it as we were getting close to fall. And he said, really, you will see it is that probably in the next 2 to 3 months, the next thing that will be coming on the radar are gloves. He said, because they're only made in certain parts of Asia primarily, and you're going to see a shortage. And by and large, here you go, the last week, what have we been hearing about are gloves. But obviously big to your part of the equation and for your kitchen staff, not necessarily maybe a huge PPE item that we have been providing for members and residents and things of that nature. But just curious on your all's feel as we're going in, and this may be, Scott said one of our last times we gather before we actually break for the holidays. Do you, in your crystal ball, have any thoughts or ideas as it relates to supply chains and where our focus should be?
That is a great question, Woody. Really, we've been in contact with our supply chain and our partners through US Foods, Cisco, and some of our secondary vendors, and really have expressed that concern. And it's all about communication with your vendors. They will, if you have the ability to move stuff, put things to the side or ensure that it's there. We haven't had any warnings from them that, hey, they're potentially seeing a shortage in gloves or PPE. We have agreements with them. So in the distribution centers, things are set to the side for us and we have to make a physical phone call. We're not ordering it through that. So that is a good point to really have, if you guys are doing individual orders through certain people like Cintas or a local vendor or something, ask them what they can do and how they can help you with that process. But right now we haven't seen anything. We have a procurement specialist that works with us, and he hasn't brought up any potential shortages in PPE or disposable products or those things at this point.
Great.
Yeah. Hey, what do you have? I'm seeing a question from Greg here. It's a great one that Christina touched on. I would love for us to reiterate it, but he's asking if we should specifically notify local police that the facility is going to be empty from this date to this date. So what are your thoughts on that? How frequently should we request a patrol, et cetera?
So as Christina alluded to, there's, depending on your community, what the university police, certainly if you have university police, to let them know, because they'll tend to maybe circle around properties more frequently than maybe the community police have the ability to do. But yes, we would provide as much specific information to that local precinct or to your university police of when it's going to be open and when it's going to be closed, or closed versus open, and who may or may not be coming around. I think it's also critical that we don't just assume that they're going to be watching, that they're, as I noted in my comments, it's really important you have someone as best as possible stopping by, ideally once a week, at a minimum every 2 weeks, that's opening the door, walking that house, checking for any issues. I mean, we have stories where at the University of Minnesota where a window was left open, and everybody went through their checklist, but we're none of us are perfect, right? And it was missed, and said room was an icicle from top to bottom, and it created about 100,000 plus damage when it was all said and done. We've heard countless stories about water issues. Certainly, you know, there's a probability that there, because something can happen, and we just need to make sure our best defense out of all the measures that Christina talked through and Will's talked through, our best defense is that routine eyes. And if we can find an alum or someone that is able to walk that facility, it's really key. But yeah, provide those specific dates, let them know. You know, by and large, as a community, they know, and most of these communities are follow what the university schedules are, and when people are around or not, and try to be more aware as they're doing their patrols and looking on campus and passing through areas where they know there could be some vacancy due to the winter break. They're typically doing that. But yeah, I would provide as much specificity, and then also contact information. If they see something or hear something, who do you want them to call? Is it you, the house director? Is there a local alum that is taking on that role through the break or wherever it may be?
Great question, great answer. Debbie Freeman's asking if there's a one pager that anyone has that we could give residents about how to prepare their rooms for a longer break. Woody, is that a resource that that we have available via the Housing Hub, or what would you? And if not, what are some of the key pieces to that you would include?
Yeah, so I'm not aware of one, Debbie. I mean, obviously, as Christina was going through a list, you know, there are plenty of winter checklists. Again, our insurance partners like MJ and what we've got in our housing hub about the entire house, but a specific for a resident's bedroom, I haven't seen anything like that, and quite frankly, hadn't thought about it. But off the top of my head, obviously, is if you do allow appliances that we don't, that the appliances are, if they're unplugged, if it's a refrigerator, the door's open and all the food's gone, or if they're leaving it, make sure any leftovers and all that's cleaned out. To one of the comments that Christina made, Debbie, early, is that, and certainly for your facility, given the amount of folks that are in it, we know it well, is that they're pulling their stuff away from the radiators, they're pulling their stuff away from the vents so that we can get adequate airflow, that the windows are closed, that they take any valuables with them. Those would probably be valuables. You have any food or appliances that are in there, anything that needs to be unplugged, and make sure that that your vents and your radiators are free to allow air to flow in the room to stay heated, and their windows. But that is something, Christina and Scott, let's make a note of it, and something we can try to create moving forward. That's a great suggestion, Debbie.
Yep. Yeah, we had I got a private message earlier asking if this checklist would be available, if we'd be sending it out, and we are going to make it available on our website, and we will probably include that link within our follow-up message to everybody who joined today. I am not seeing any additional questions, and I want to be sensitive to everybody's time, so we'll just start to wrap up here and let you get back to your day. But we've covered a ton over the last few months, and this is just a really appropriate topic to wrap up this season of House and Home with. And we covered a ton today just within this session in terms of planning for this season and making sure we've got the fundamentals in place so that we can execute at a high level over this extended break. So a lot to do, a lot to cover, and a lot to prepare for as we go into this extended holiday break. So with that being said, we want to make sure that you stay in touch, and that if you have questions that they don't go unanswered. So if you have a question over anything we've covered over the last few months or anything we covered today, please do not hesitate to reach out. We are here, ready, willing, and able to help, and want to make sure that you get your questions answered so that we're supporting our facilities and supporting our students as best as we possibly can. So our contact information is all there. Please feel free to call, email, text, whatever is easiest for you, and we'll get back to you at our first opportunity. So with that being said, I do want to say thank you again for joining us today, and for joining us on all of our sessions since March. It's been a really wonderful experience putting these sessions together and having so many of you join us on a weekly basis. So thanks so much for all you're doing, and for making sure that our facilities are effectively managed so that our students are having the best possible experience that they can have. So with that being said, thanks again for your time today, and thanks for joining us here on House and Home, and we will see you on the other side in 2021. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.